Our topic today is around unlocking manager engagement, and we'll just really be focusing on the key to driving organizational resilience and employee experience. The session today is brought to you by Bucketlist, and we're the #1 employee rewards and recognition platform. And we're here today in partnership with our friends from Hypercontext. They've built an awesome all-in-one system where managers build organizational success. And so just a perfect partners for this topic today. Cannot wait to hear from Jocelyn more on this topic. She has like a world of expertise in this. Now for some really quick introductions. Hello, I'm Rebecca. I'm your host for today. I'm the community manager here at Bucketlist Rewards, and one of my top passions professionally is all about helping companies build happy and rewarding workplace cultures where employees can thrive. I organized our Bucketlist community webinar program, and today just really excited to be here with all of you to dive into that topic of manager engagement. And our mission with these webinar events is really to bring the latest thought leadership to our community and provide a space for culture leaders like yourselves to ask questions, share thoughts and experiences, and just connect with one another. A little bit about me outside of work. I really enjoy paddleboarding, hiking, reading, and exploring the food scene here in Vancouver. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our lovely panel here today. Starting off with Jocelyn. Jocelyn is the head of customer success and sales at Hypercontext. She's really focused on helping managers lead high-performing teams, and she spent more than 15 years in B2B SaaS. And her area of expertise specifically is building and managing high-performing customer success teams that drive recurring value and develop lifelong customers. Sean is a customer success manager at Bucketlist, and he has over 15 years of experience in account management. He really enjoys helping companies create a positive culture that engages and recognizes employees, which ultimately leads to increased productivity and success. And outside of work, Sean enjoys exploring new destinations and gaining fresh perspectives along the way. Last but not least, we have Rodrigo here. He's a customer success specialist at Bucketlist, and he has over 10 years of experience in all areas, customer service being one of them, sales, account management, and marketing. He's super passionate about helping companies build great workplace cultures through the use of rewards and recognition. And he believes that no company will operate to its fullest potential unless the employees are happy. And outside of work, he really enjoys playing video games, hiking, watching movies and TV shows, and trying new restaurants. There we have it, the perfect panel to talk about manager engagement today and how it helps with driving employee engagement and building business results. Awesome. Now that you know a little bit more about us, we'd love to learn a little bit about you. And so in the spirit of just building community here, let's kick things off with a fun little icebreaker. So the question we have for you today, kind of in line with our overall theme, is there a manager you'd work for again or someone you'd follow anywhere, and why? And as we let people think about that for a little bit, Sean, do you want to kick us off with your answer to this question?
Yeah, one shout out to Lynn in the chat. Radrod is a nickname that we have internally for Rodrigo, and apparently has expanded outside of our company. So that's awesome to see. In terms of this question, yeah, I have a couple of memorable managers over my time that I actually did follow from team to team, department to department in one of my companies. One was just a great way to introduce me to all the top managers and SLT members of my company. It really helped me learn the context of the company really well. The other one empowered me into just making sure that all my visions for our team was fully exceeded and kind of had that support along the way. So easily those two came to mind that I'd easily follow anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Support is so important.
Definitely.
Yeah. Jocelyn?
Yeah, I for sure do. I mean, I feel pretty lucky in having worked for some great leaders. For me, the key is always ones that give me a lot of context rather than a lot of instruction or direction, and let me figure out how to solve the problem and encourage me along the way. So micromanaging doesn't work on me for sure. So those that really were open to bringing me into the decision-making cycle, giving me enough information to do that, that's always really what appealed to me. And I would absolutely follow some of those people and I actually have had people who worked for me who, inspire the same for their employees. So if you build up enough of those, you can just take an entire company with you somewhere else, right? So I think that that's sort of what we look at. I would say that I posted this on LinkedIn yesterday, and it's very cool to see all these people listing managers from their past that have had such a huge impact. So if you have had one of those managers, let them know. That's kind of an awesome way to brighten someone's days, to let them know the impact they've had on you. So I'd put that out there.
I love the themes around empowerment. That's just so important, and giving people enough context. Hopping into the comments, Luzma shared that they had a manager who is a definite role model, and they understood all the business and technical challenges, and now they kind of followed in footsteps being a manager and apply all of that advice that they've learned, which is really awesome to hear and to see. And Rod, how about you?
Yeah, so actually it's a funny story. I have been very grateful to work with a lot of really good managers throughout my career, but yeah, in my last job, that manager actually called me, and he shared with me a job posting and asked if I knew somebody. And then he just muted for a while, and he said, I actually think you could be good for the job. Well, the thing is, long story short, he hired me. So that was like the first sign of complete trust towards me. And that was, I think, mainly the key thing in that relationship, the trust. When I joined the company, like, you could clearly see that he would trust my judgment, my decisions, my actions. So we had a great chemistry working together. And yeah, that's a really, really fun story. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Trust is just, yeah, so important. When you can tell that someone trusts you, it just feels it makes me feel super valued and seen. So love that for you. And Jocelyn, you got a shout out here in the comments. That's awesome. Yeah. And Julie also shared that the leader that she wanted to highlight is someone who would never ask the team to do anything that she wouldn't do herself. And that's, I think, a really great example of leadership as well. And I'm noticing a common theme here, where people are saying that the leaders that they've looked up to or had great impact on them, they've kind of taken their thoughts, their advice, their strategies, and applied it to themselves to be the leaders that they are today, which is really, really cool to see. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. And as we go on, if there's any other traits of a good manager that has really impacted you or you want to share, feel free to drop in the comments. I think it's a really great theme, and it'll just always be relevant throughout our conversation today. So no worries, just drop it in whenever you have a moment. Great, so now here's the agenda. We've promised something super jam-packed, so here it is. We've broken it down to 3 parts. So the first section will be kind of setting the stage and talking about the impact that managers have on an organization's employee experience and engagement. Next, we'll move into a framework and talk a bit more about how exactly to evaluate whether or not your system is supportive of your managers. And lastly, we'll end off with some strategies around manager engagement. And because Hypercontext and Bucketlist were our bread and butter is really feedback and recognition, we thought it would make sense to just talk about those strategies today and answer like any questions that come up and just offer strategies we've seen work really well in the past. And as we wrap up, we'll be sharing our professional development credits, key takeaways, as well as Q&A. And just the last housekeeping slide before we do get started. There is the chat box feature. We appreciate all the comments coming in. Just a gentle reminder that if it's something you want everybody to be able to see a comment, make sure the blue drop down is everybody and not just panelists and hosts. Otherwise, it's just us reading them. Q&A, because there's a lot of comments coming in, I don't want any of the questions to get lost. So you feel free to use that Q&A box instead. Poll questions, we will have a few throughout. And so the answers, when we share them, it's going to be aggregated. So we're not going to call anybody out or anything. So feel free to answer as honestly as you'd like. And professional development credits, session recording, those will all be sent out via email after the event. Perfect. So as promised, we are kicking things off with a poll. And as I launch this, Perfect. Is that showing up for all of you? Yep, perfect. So the question is, to what extent does your organization support managers and keep them engaged? We just love to kick off the conversation this way. And if you have any additional thoughts that aren't really, covered in the spectrum we've offered, please feel free to share with us in the chat box. And Rod, Jocelyn, Sean, are you able to see the answers coming in right now, or am I the only one seeing that?
You're the only one seeing the answers, I think.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The
Well,
cards. Yeah.
In that case, I'll wait a couple more seconds and then we'll share and we can talk about it. But in the meantime, Jocelyn, do you have any thoughts on this question and what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason I started kind of looking into this is that I think there's been lots of focus and to our benefit on employee experience, and managers are employees too, so they actually get impacted by those programs. But there's a very specific lens to be applied to managers because their job is just different, and it's the stats are sort of horrible about the level of burnout and disengagement among managers. Some of it, the impact of layoffs or the pandemic, or choose your favorite downturn, and some of it from there's been somewhat of a trend also on kind of diminishing the role of manager and elevating the role of makers. And while I think there should be an elevation of some roles where you're actually creating things, not to the detriment of anybody else. The pie is big enough for everybody. Sun shines everywhere. So I think just having a little bit of intentionality around doing something specific for managers has a massive compounding impact. So I think just, again, it's just a little bit of intention, a little bit of a shift in lens, and you can have just a huge impact because your managers impact everybody else. So it just occurred to me that that's in a constrained environment where you don't have a lot of budget, you need to use it wisely. And this is maybe one thing you can do where just a narrow audience has a bigger impact.
Amazing. Yeah. Those are great insights, Jocelyn. And I know we'll definitely be diving really deep into that as well in the next question. So that's just a great little preview to set things up. Rod, Sean, the results are in. Let me know if you're not able to see it, but do you have any thoughts on how people have answered this question?
Yeah, I can see that most of the answers there's definitely room for improvement for the support to managers. And I would say internally, one of the things that is really important is to have the tools in place to actually analyze, to see, I'm a manager, to see what's going on within my team. It's just one person that needs to go one by one to see the actual interaction with the employee. But if there's tools in place to be able to get reports on how the employees are doing, but also the engagement, how they're interacting, in our case, through recognitions, determining factors like the core values, like what core values are being used. So have all those tools in place to give the managers the tools to be able to be more engaged with their team and also to do their job more successfully,
Totally.
Yeah, I would also kind of echo with Rodrigo I think it's always a nice position to think could always be something that we could always improve and kind of adapt with as well. As Jocelyn was saying, we've had a really interesting last couple of years with a lot of needs to change and adapt into the workforce and workplace and such. So I think it's always a great way to kind of sit back, review what we're doing right now in terms of manager support or employee support, and always try to see what's available out there as well.
Totally. These are such a great segue into our first question here today. So without further ado, I guess we'll dive in. So section 1, what impact do managers have on their organization's employee experience and engagement? And Jocelyn, I'll toss this question.
Yes, sir.
First.
Probably one of the most quoted stats is a Gallup one around 70% of the variance in employee engagement is directly attributable to their manager, but it's kind of a vague stat. And you also have that sort of saying that people don't leave companies, they leave their manager. That I think is a bit maybe too simplistic, but more and more research is sort of showing that employees now trust their direct manager for information more than anyone else. It's a Salesforce study. They're actually looking to their managers for career pathing, for all the things that are actually going to keep them engaged at work. So if you're trying to engage your entire workforce, there is a group of people whose job it is to do that. But if you're not equipping them, as Rodrigo said, with a way to do that, if you're not actually giving them the tools and the training to be able to do that, you're one, missing an opportunity, but you're also introducing a bunch of risk. Similarly, Gallup looked at, sort of how with the impact on engagement of employees who work for engaged managers. So employees who work for engaged managers are almost 60% more likely to be engaged themselves. So just by engaging the one, you could get all 8, if the average is 7 direct employees or something like that. So it's just got a compounding factor, both in the positive and the negative. And I think probably a lot of what I read is just the amount of manager burnout right now. If we're looking to managers to help promote engagements and to help people navigate this change, but they're already burnt out, I mean, we're putting too much expectation on a group that just doesn't have it in them anymore. So I think a lot of things have come together to kind of highlight the fact that end of the day, the managers, the experience one-to-one, and in a remote world, sometimes your manager's face is kind of your office. That's kind of all you got because you're sitting at home. So I just think there's a lot of things that are reinforcing, and that 70% staff is old. It's been stable for a decade. So managers have always mattered, and they matter a lot to engagement. And we know a ton more about engagement and its impact on business outcomes now. So I think just tying that all together makes you realize that there's a huge opportunity and a huge risk there.
And I think it's so interesting too that you've mentioned the idea of remote work. Like I know a lot of our community members, a lot of people here today, they are in that remote situation. And so what are your thoughts around this question in the context of remote work?
It's gotten significantly harder for managers. If you look at any of the research around, managers are saying they're in more meetings, they have less time. So their available time to direct one-on-one and have meaningful engagements with their direct reports may have actually really diminished. And they are carrying the burden of a lot of things that you could kind of get away with an office. In some ways, somebody could be really engaged in a day just because they ran into a bunch of people in the hall or they had more so that happenstance. They may be able to get context about strategy or something from somebody other than their direct manager. Those kind of safety nets are gone for those of us in a remote environment. And depending on how much your company's put behind improving the ability to collaborate and transparency and availability of that information, you may find a lot of people lost. So remote's made it a lot harder on frontline managers and on individual contributors, but mostly it just managers are suffering.
And if there's anybody here in the audience today who's kind of used to be like an in-person manager, now it's like a remote manager or just always remote, would love to hear what your experience has been with this as well. It'll be super interesting to talk about. Yeah, Rod, Sean, is there anything you'd like to add to this question?
I think also in context of the remote side of things is even just generational differences and how your manager can impact you. Sometimes one generation will want to be recognized in a different way versus what maybe you're used to. So that's another thing that we always like to consider is how effective is that recognition in terms of, like the approach of that recognition as well. But I think Jocelyn really nailed it, especially in the work environment or the remote work environment. It's really tough to see what even another manager is doing in terms of recognition as well. But I think it also kind of relates back to our icebreaker chat. It does have a huge impact on the employee side of things. We all kind of probably pictured a perfect manager in our head, and then we probably pictured another manager that maybe was not the best as well. So it does impact your day-to-day quite significantly. And if we can help kind of companies think about that approach with managers, I think it does have a great impact at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Rod, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, on the same topic about the remote work, we actually have a new feature on our product that's called a maturity assessment. And what this does is actually to provide employee feedback and direct manager interviews to provide insights of how their team feels and the experience within the company. We've seen this is very successful because, as Jocelyn mentioned, like you were in the office before, you could actually talk to the employees, but now it's harder to do that. And through the surveys, you gain a lot of insight to understand things that you would never be able to understand through a computer monitor, right? So those are the kind of tools that would definitely help managers that way.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're talking about insights, because I think that is the perfect segue into our next question here. So we'll leave all that at that and move on here. Yeah, so talk a little bit about the idea of evaluation. When we were prepping for the session, I know we really want to talk about how we can evaluate whether or not the systems in place are actually supportive of our managers. And I know that as a group, as we chatted on this panel, we found out that some really, really prominent categories came up. And so just as a little spoiler alert for the community here today, we ended up creating a little bit of a manager support evaluation framework, which we'll share with you on the next slide here. And before we do that, we did want to note that a lot of the measurement tools that you are using today will work and does work, but we hope that this next slide here provides an easy and succinct way for you to think about manager support. So we're really excited to hear what you think about this framework, and if there's anything else that you think should be added, we'd love to hear that as well. Awesome. So I'll kick things off to Sean to talk about the first little quadrant. Not quadrant, there's 6 things and quadrant implies 4. This little framework of 6 parts. Sean, I'll kick it to you first.
There you go. Yeah. So communication, we identified this as one of the support frameworks. Really boils down to how easy is it for your department to communicate with each other? Is it easy for your managers to advocate for an employee of yours? A leader really kind of makes the most of their team and helps kind of drive the successes from their team. It's not about them, it's more about their team. So how can they communicate that out? But is it easy for people to have access to that communication as well, especially in a remote environment, or if you have a mixture of like people in the office and in the field? Sometimes it's not easy for the team to kind of see what's happening within the organization as a whole. So kind of making it super easy for teams to see what's happening on a day-to-day basis really opens the doors, but also trying to decrease kind of the friction in terms of how does that recognition work, or how do you support your employees? That's another key aspect of that. So when it comes to communication, it even kind of comes back down to just feedback forms. Kind of what Rodrigo was alluding to is making sure that we're kind of understanding at all levels of the organization what's happening, who's finding it difficult to recognize their team or help engage their team. It really kind of helps a leadership level team member or SLT team member to fully understand what's happening within their organization.
Totally. And everything's kind of tying together. We were talking a lot about remote work, and I feel that in the remote environment where you don't see people physically as often, the idea of like over communicating something is just so important. So making sure that managers have those tools and structures in place to be able to communicate or like receive communication is just so much easier to make sure that everyone's sort of on the same page.
Yeah, and also it just even from a new hire context, you're first coming into the company, having the visibility within the organization to see who's doing what departments are recognizing each other or engaging with each other really helps even let them understand what they're walking into and kind of what their company is all about as well.
Really. Well, core values and culture, I think, Rod, you wanted to speak to this one.
Yeah, that's me. So if you think about it, like I'm pretty sure everyone here it's aware of KPIs. With KPIs, you can measure a result, right? You basically know if you're achieving the expected results. However, culture and core values are often harder to measure. They have a lot of non-tangible values, but provide some really excellent context on a team's behavior. We have account value reviews with clients every quarter, and we often ask clients, how would you define your company culture? And then ask, how would your employees define your company culture? And it's surprising how sometimes the answers we get, and most importantly, we often see a slight gap in what the manager might respond to what an employee might think. So core values that could actually help bridge that gap. Because if you think about it, like teamwork, curiosity, integrity, those are core values. However, how can you actually measure those with numbers? And even if you could, it would help humanize this. And I'll give you an example with an actual client. We have a food and beverages company. We did an account value review with them end of last year. And when we saw through the platform, we were able to see that one of their core values, it was called One Team. 54.6% of all the recognitions made during that year were based on that core value, which is an awesome result because you could see that they are a very engaged team working together. However, their objectives, our company objectives, OKRs, were trying to steer towards a more inclusive company. So, they also have a core value called inclusive culture creators, which that year only had 7.9% in the engagement. So with this sort of data points, they were able to actually focus more strategies towards the inclusivity of the company to be able to do that shift. And this is how core values would actually help you out to analyze and understand the behavior within your team.
That's so powerful, Rodrigo, just because I know you mentioned this, like core values is just such a great tool to help people understand what kind of behaviors align with what's important to the company. And it's just so cool to hear you bring up those stats where maybe they had like 4 values. One of them was being like met exceedingly. And then when they're looking at, that one's only 7%, maybe we should put more effort into trying to either, help people understand that that's also a core value or encourage people to kind of do that behavior more often. So it's a really cool lens that you've brought, and I really like that.
Thank you.
All right. And I think this one back to Sean.
Yeah, for awards and incentives, this kind of boils down into a few talking points. One of them is really on the awards side of things. Are they effective awards? Are they awards that, maybe are open up for managers to give out amongst their team as well? So I have a manufacturing client of ours that really went into the idea of allowing their managers to give out safety awards when somebody saw and prevented a safety issue from happening, or even just kind of wanted to have kind of very team specific awards. And I think that's very powerful for a manager to have available to them. They know their team the best. They know how to probably incentivize their team the best. So giving a little bit of flexibility and a little bit more power to the managers to come up with better fitting awards, or even just feedback as to what those awards could look like, really does make an impact on how engaged a manager can be with a program. The other idea also is just making sure that the incentives themselves, or whatever is the side effect of the conclusion of that award, matches your team's interest. I've worked with a company for many, many years where I was about to hit my 15th year, and my only real option for a prize was like a stand mixer. I'm not a cook, baker at all, but it was like one of those options that I had available to me. So it was something I was looking forward to, but also at the same time probably would have been just sitting collecting dust as we speak. So really trying to figure out a flexible way to incentivize your team, figure out what they want in terms of rewards, really does allow for the team to see value from the program, but your manager also will have the ability to say, yeah, like I really want to incentivize my team. I want to give rewards to my team because I know it's something that they'll find meaningful as well.
I love that, Sean. Especially love the idea of making sure the incentives are something people actually want, because when incentives are kind of offered correctly or in a really meaningful way, then it makes a manager's job a lot easier in some ways. Just as an example, one of my friends was telling me that their company really wanted people to take this super optional course around, safety, for example. That's the example you're using. And then instead of getting managers to like constantly encourage people to do it or beg them to do it, the incentive to do it was, okay, once you do it, you get 2 days of vacation this year. And so people were hopping on it, everyone was doing it. And it was just, a great incentive to encourage people to do the behaviors that you want them to be doing. Yeah. Awesome. Jocelyn, I think this next one's for you.
Yeah, I think one of the, in research we've done, anywhere you read it, sort of clarity around goals and, how to succeed is one of the things that provides the highest engagement for employees and managers alike. So transparency around KPIs and availability of organizational data at all levels will also just reduce some of the burden. So managers aren't sort of stuck just regurgitating what's been kind of told to them, they can actually actively engage with the KPIs and the organizational data so that they can be sharing it. They can actually be reviewing it to see and connect their work and their team's work to it personally. When it feels like it's locked in a safe or a black box, it makes it really tough for them to feel ownership and therefore kind of pass that on to their own teams. The other thing is, if you really can see all of the organization's OKRs or KPIs, whatever that is, you may find the opportunity where you can help someone else. So that management layer is much closer to the work, much closer to the collaboration and the opportunity. And if you start now making it possible for people to help each other within your sort of middle management, or, you know, between the senior leadership team and your individual contributors, you can have a huge amount of productivity that makes them feel a sense of mastery and autonomy, that makes them feel sort of ownership and contribution. And you now get this sort of layer of collaboration in there. And again, this is another one of those things that got really much harder during the pandemic. So if you have a good ops team, first of all, buy them gifts and make sure that as much as you can, you're making as much, go right to the edge of the data that you can make available for everyone. The more transparent you are, the more people will actually buy into how much they can impact those metrics. And it's usually the manager doing the interpretation between strategy and execution. So that context of data is going to make it much easier for them to do that.
I love, Jocelyn, how you're talking about KPIs and data in the sense of it's here to support people, here to help people, because often I think it's a way to like measure, and it can be so stressful and so pressuring. So I just love the lens that you're taking on this one.
It's not judging, it's just input.
Right? Yeah.
It's just math. Math doesn't judge.
KPIs don't need to be evil. No.
No, not at all.
Awesome. This next one I think is also yours.
That is. This one seems possibly out of place, but I think one of the things you can do is actually review your process and policies to see if they put undue burden on your managers. There are so many things that we have to put in place for risk-related reasons. There's lots of things we put in place as a reaction to someone, and too often it's managers that end up being either the enforcers or the people that have to kind of collect the data on them and things like that. And sometimes you have to do that, right? It's a reaction to a situation. But if you never go back and review and evaluate those policies and processes from the angle of, am I putting an undue burden, or am I adding low value work into sort of that management tier, you're just going to keep adding and not even realize it. So I think there's just an opportunity to support managers by looking, are your process and policies necessary? Sometimes they outlive their usefulness. Are they supported properly? Do they put an undue burden on your managers? Because I think there's some hidden gems of opportunity to relieve them of work in there, but there's also probably some unintended consequences on things that you've done. And I think managers, bureaucracy gets complained about a lot. Sometimes it's just because people aren't paying attention. And I think any kind of process to regularly evaluate the impact of process and policies on management from a maintenance and an oversight kind of perspective will help. And they'll appreciate it.
Totally. Things are constantly changing. Like I know I've like written policies or processes and thought this is a really great way to do something. And then 3 months later, like, are we still doing this? It doesn't make sense anymore. Perfect. And this last one, I know it's your absolute favorite, Jocelyn. So
it's my favorite. Yeah. There's our CEO, Brennan, often talks about how the first time you get kind of moved into a management role, it's a career change disguised as a promotion. When you become a manager, your peer set becomes different. Your day-to-day starts becoming more aligned with other people who manage people than necessarily with your team that's doing the execution of whatever task it is. So I think one of the best things you can do for your managers is give them a way to get peer support, whether it's a manager forum, something like that. Lots of people will think about manager training. That's how we're investing in them. And that's great, but that does not help you practice. That does not give you a safe place to get advice. That does not give you the benefit of experienced managers maybe contributing, because your peers in your management tier are probably dealing with some of the same hard issues that you are that have nothing to do with your discipline or your expertise in a tactical execution. So you can do this in really light ways, Slack groups, informal kind of sessions. You can do these in really formal ways with mentorship programs and otherwise, but recognizing that peer group is necessary and not necessarily natural is a great thing. Side benefit is now you get cross-departmental collaboration without necessarily forcing it through some sort of like a project or otherwise, just because these people begin to empathize with each other and understand each other. You also get now less of us and them between departments. You're breaking down some silos because now I understand the pressure that other person's under. So now I can maybe be a bit more empathetic as to why they're doing these and making these decisions. So a lot of side benefits, but the main one is that your managers need other people to talk to about the things they're going through. Otherwise, the pressure is just going up and up. It's whoever's above them is the only place they can get that support, and that person's already overburdened.
Totally. And I know everyone in the audience here is probably thinking, so what are some strategies we can do to kind of kickstart something like this if we don't have it already? Sean, Jocelyn, do you have any thoughts on something like that?
I mean, the last people operations or people leader that I worked with was one of the first things she did was create a manager forum. And it, met, I want to say it was even monthly, but they met around a specific kind of company problem. And so it was bringing that set of people in to help solve it. And it was voluntary and it was time bound. So you're not signing up for something that goes on forever and that you don't have time for. So I think making it a bit flexible, making it voluntary, but also giving it some real teeth in terms of it's solving something that's a real thing in the company, I think is probably a really nice way to do it. If it's too passive, you may not get what you want out of it. You want to actually encourage them to develop and use the skills that they're doing. So I thought that was great. But even as simple as, a Slack group, that's just that group of people would do. And kick your ELT out. Get your senior leadership team out of there. This is a place where they can complain about them too.
I think that's so powerful. My partner in her job ends up sitting up by a lot of VPs and kind of SLT members, and then even just sees kind of that conversation at that level in between each other of kind of complaining upwards as well, because there's not that mechanism for them to really provide that proper feedback. So I think that's really a great context to bring to the table is the managers mid-level or just even starting out, it can be a very lonely job. They might not feel like they have that support mechanism in place. So I think, creating that Slack channel at the very minimum or some way for them to just start to kind of communicate across their channels really does help out in that. And I think it is also very powerful to kind of kick the SLT team out of that picture, have that open transparency, build up that trust so that they can kind of bounce some ideas off each other. We were talking about it just earlier today is it's really hard to create something from scratch. It's easier to edit some ideas and kind of start to move forward. And those opportunities really open up the door for your team to just not need to think, what do I need to do in this context? I can kind of reach out to my peer group as well.
It is my favorite. I think it's the most powerful thing you can do, and it's the simplest.
Definitely.
Amazing. Awesome. So now we'll move into our third question. Give everyone a moment to screenshot this framework if they're interested in keeping it for future use. Awesome. So now we'll move into the strategy portion. So we've talked about why engaging our managers is so important and so impactful. We just talked about a framework to understand whether or not we're supporting our managers in the act of managing. So now we'll end things off and talk a little bit about strategy. So how can strategies like feedback and recognition support managers? And we chose these two strategies specifically just because it is the bread and butter of Hypercontext and Bucketlist. And so that is the reason, not to say these are the only strategies, but these are strategies we'll be focusing on today. Jocelyn, I'll kick things off to you first to talk about feedback.
Yeah, I think so. one of the ways that Hypercontext sort of participates in feedback is in lowering the friction of having really good one-on-ones and building in feedback as a muscle, right? So it can be an organizational value similar to what Rod was talking about, but it's generally a practice that you're trying to encourage because teams that trust each other, that give regular feedback and hold each other accountable are high-performing teams. But some of the strategies you need to do is really put some intentionality around it. So one, expect it. So communicate clearly that feedback is expected, provide a way to do it, lower the barriers to that, provide prompts, provide easy and low friction ways to do it. For your manager group, you also want to help them practice it, give them the tools to be able to do that. I think the other thing about feedback is making sure that you're actually getting all of the feedback. So being a little bit more intentional about making sure not just one-on-ones happening with managers, but do you have a practice or a deliberate sourcing of feedback at the skip level? So if you manage if you're a manager of managers, how often are you actually meeting with the people that work for them? And do you have any kind of mechanism that's doing that? There's lots of ways to do that. You can do surveys. Some of the ENPS stuff you do are already there. You can have deliberate questions for that, but it's super powerful to do that in a conversation. And we've got lots of templates on ways to run that well. And you don't have to start from scratch and come up with questions yourself. We've got lots of ways that on our site that you can, free templates you can download and the like. But it's more just about the intentionality. Are you actually getting all of the information? Have you made it easy for people to tell you hard things? And are you making sure that everybody's practicing it and showing them that when they do that, there's benefit? So anytime you have a feedback conversation, you need to lower the barrier, so make it easy. You need to show them that there's benefit from doing it, and that that there's a high level of psychological safety. Nothing bad's going to happen to them if they do that. So if you make it consistent, deliberate, those things will build over time. You might get sort of the small stuff early on, but eventually you'll build up that safety, that psychological safety that lets people tell you the hard stuff because they know that you'll act on it and they know that it's there for a purpose and that it's consistent. So most of it to me is about being intentional and having a plan and a design. There's lots of advice and templates out there. Our tool certainly makes it simple and embeds it into their day-to-day habits. But there's no question that when you're getting a more complete picture, less is being kind of held at one person, at that manager. And if you're making it really easy for managers to have feedback conversations, they're not just doing it twice a year in a review where they're super stressed out and it's a big deal, right? If you do it every week, it becomes easy.
Totally. I love what you're saying about intentionalities. I just think that's so important. And also just having the intention to take that feedback and do something with
it always. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of templates and not starting from scratch always sounds very appealing to me as well. Would you mind sharing a few templates that you kind of suggest for feedback? That might be kind
of. I totally can. We have a whole library, but I'll grab a couple and drop them into the chat for folks.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Jocelyn. Awesome. Rod, Sean, I think the intentionality piece is a great segue into what y'all want to talk about for recognition. Do you want me to hop to the next slide or stay here for a little bit?
Yeah, I think we could probably hop to the next slide, kind of work from there. So when it comes to strategies and feedback with recognitions for managers and the support, it really kind of breaks down to a few type of bullet points in terms of how does recognition really kind of flow within your organization. We kind of came up with a three-part kind of breakdown of what recognitions could truly mean as well. When you're a manager, really, even I think there's an anonymous attendee asking, currently an interim manager, would love to learn more about it. I'm still learning. I think one of the things that you can start to learn is how the intent is in that recognition as well. So for intent really is, when it comes to recognition, what's the intent of that? One of the examples is I could, recognize Rebecca on creating and redesigning our new website. So we really want to have that as detailed as possible. We want to let Rebecca know, what I'm thanking her for, but also that allows the team to know exactly what she's being recognized for. I think often one of the struggles is, how do I recognize somebody? What do I recognize them for? And keeping it in an open and transparent type of conversation allows others to really just see what's happening within the organization. So a tool like ours, where it's a recognition platform, allows me to broadcast that to the team. Everybody gets to see that. But maybe if it was a different type of recognition that I saw one of my managers or another manager do, I could kind of take that into context of, okay, like this is what a recognition looks like. This was that intent. I'm going to kind of take that, store that into my mind. So when I go to recognize somebody on my team, I now kind of understand what the intent is that I'm doing. The impact, obviously, Rebecca in this scenario definitely feels like she's been appreciated. There's a lot of hard work that kind of comes along with a website design that maybe even me from a manager level might not even have an idea of what was really in the day-to-day grind of doing that. And then the ripple effect of that is really coming down to kind of cross-departmental silos, kind of breaking down, remote work kind of breaking down. We get to see all the hard work that everybody else on the team is doing. So in this scenario, Rod gets to see, you know, oh, the website changed, looks rad. He gets to share that with all his clients, but also that allows him to see, you know, all the hard work that Rebecca did as well. So it really helps kind of ensure that people are seeing all the hard work that's within the teams. We've kind of harped on the remote work as being one of those challenges. And if you can use a platform like ours or ways to kind of communicate these recognitions, definitely does impact somebody on a day-to-day basis.
Well, thanks for breaking that down, Sean. Like, I feel like a lot of times we just think, oh, recognition, it's so easy to tell someone good job, but there's like a lot that goes behind it, a lot of intent, intentionality, and then there's a lot of people who are impacted by it. And all in all, it's a great strategy to have in the toolbox. And Rod.
Yeah. Okay. So some of you might be asking, why are we showing you a GIF of 3 really cute cats? And this is actually coming from what Sean was mentioning. We wanted to show a real example in our platform and how the intent, the impact, and the ripple effect happens. If you don't mind moving to the next slide, Becca. So you could see an example here. It's basically our VP of Customer and Business Services gave this recognition to 3 individuals. Right. So firstly, the intent itself is our VP wanted to recognize the team because they completed 3 of their quarterly projects. Right. The result itself, it's those 3 individuals were recognized, were accounted for, you know, so it strengthens the bond between the team, the VP, and just the company itself. And then the ripple effect, it's now the whole company knows that we have created an improved help center. There's a new and improved account management pipeline. And we also migrated a swag provider to another vendor. So this is how you could actually dissect a recognition and see those 3 stages through a recognition. And that's how it's very impactful. And one thing to note as well, like it's important to see that people have different ways when it comes to giving out recognition, and there isn't only one way to recognize, and there isn't a correct way to recognize, right? We always say that, of course, try to be meaningful through a recognition, not just say thank you, right? But at least explain a little bit in context. But I'll give you some examples internally. We have individuals that would give a big recognition, like a huge paragraph like that one you're seeing on the screen. Then we have other managers that actually recognize in the end of the week, and they recognize every single member on their team and what they do. And then there's me, that whenever I'm working with someone and I want to recognize them because of something they helped me with or did, I would literally be typing on my other monitor the recognition while we have the meeting. So like literally live. So yeah, that's basically how you would see those 3 stages through a recognition.
Well, thanks, Rod. I love the last point you made, especially how not everyone does recognition in the same way, and lots of different ways to express yourself and help you feel comfortable giving and receiving recognition. So it's really awesome. Great. So let's speed through the next part and get to our Q&A. Thank you to all 3 of you for sharing these awesome strategies. So the beginning of the end, today's key takeaways. Number 1, dedicated investment in managers is a high leverage multiplier, as Jocelyn was saying a lot for question number 1. Second one, building a community for your managers is super important just because management is something that can be super lonely. Number 3, there is no right way to be a manager. You just need to know your team and what they sort of need. And lastly, one small recognition can create a ripple effect that's felt across the entire organization and beyond it. I think we have a minute to spare here if either of you would like to comment on any of these key takeaways really quickly.
I think I double down on kind of what Rod was just saying. Number 3, there's not really there's no real right way to be a manager. Everybody's going to kind of approach it from different angles. So I think if you let people learn and be their own managers and kind of embrace the positive attributes that they're showing, I think it will really go a long way as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. Awesome. So now we're going to launch our second poll. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So we're just looking always to improve our sessions. And so this question here is just for us to understand what sort of went well, how you felt about it. And if you feel so inclined, I would love it and appreciate it if you could share in the chat what topics or what resonated with you the most today. I really like the qualitative comments so I can kind of sift through it and understand exactly what it was that people liked or wanted to see more of. So appreciate all of you in advance for voting on this poll. That's the word. Yes, thank you all so much. Let's keep it open for another second or so. Awesome. And now I'm going to hop here and just give a little bit more context around Bucketlist and how we can support manager engagement in your organization. And so I'll end that poll and launch another one. And so if you're interested in chatting with us or learning a bit more, just feel free to let us know in this first question here. And don't close it. Jocelyn will talk a little bit about Hypercontext in a second here. But for us, in a nutshell, Bucketlist is an employee rewards and recognition platform, and supporting managers is just something that's super near and dear to our hearts. We believe that recognition is just so important to helping people feel engaged and valued and like they belong, regardless of what level they're sitting at in the organization. And we totally understand too that there's lots of challenges when it comes to engagement. Lots of different generations in the workplace itself. Everyone has different interests and needs. And so it can be really hard to make sure that everyone feels recognized and rewarded in the way that's most meaningful to them. And so we're just really passionate about helping organizations build that best workplace culture that they want to see and help managers and their teams feel valued. And so if you were interested, would like to chat further, learn a bit about us a little bit more, just feel free to let me know in the chat. So not in chat, in this poll. And now I will kick it off to Jocelyn.
Yeah, so if you haven't guessed, at Hypercontext, we focus a lot on the manager. Managers are really unlocking the power of managers unlocks your performance. And we're looking to try and help companies be performance oriented and operate better and do that every day. So a lot of our focus is really on the things that are happening day to day, week over week. A lot of that happens in meetings. So it's an all-in-one system integrated right into your calendar to help you streamline meetings, make them more intentional, and make them actually more productive, potentially have less of them. Have high impact one-on-ones where you're having that feedback, you're building trust, accountability, and what makes a high performing team, aligning on goals. Again, bringing it all into the thing you're already doing rather than a separate place to go for it. It's in your calendar, it's in your meetings, it's happening every day. And then we wrap that all up with AI performance reviews. So use all of the information that you've been collecting as you do your one-on-ones, your team meetings, and your goal updates, and using that as the first draft of your performance review to make sure that, again, we're not putting a ton of burden on managers. We're actually facilitating what's a really important process by making it a lot easier and simpler for them and giving them the benefit of, reviews that write themselves based on the daily habits they've been practicing. So if you make performance a daily habit, it will actually drive the outcomes for your company.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing, Jocelyn. Awesome. So now this is the moment you've all been waiting for, the professional development credits. They're here on screen. We have the our HRCI one here, 63, 57, 12, and the SHRM one, 23-E4JYV. These will also be emailed out after the fact, and during the Q&A session, I'll just copy and paste them into the chat box, so no worries there. We'll just hop on into the Q&A and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions during the conversation. And I also want to give a shout out to all of you who submitted a question prior to the session. That was really much appreciated. And I will just dive into the first question here. So from Matthew, how do you balance good work as part of the job and incentives relative to great work?
Okay, if you don't mind, I would like to respond to that one. I was going to respond earlier. So Matthew, this one's for you. We actually have an energy company here in Canada that does this really well. In our platform, you can set up recognitions itself through points, but you can also set up awards. So this company set up 3 tiers of awards: great job. Sorry, no, it was good job, great job, and outstanding job. And it had different point levels for that. And we managers actually give those in batch to their team depending on the performance. So that's just an idea for you how you could balance whether if it's a good job or a great job that the employee did. That's a really cool idea that they use, and yeah, it's working really well for them.
Amazing. And let's go to one that someone submitted prior. How do I get my managers to have more regular feedback conversations? Jocelyn, this one seems up your alley.
Sure. I mean, feedback's one of those things that you have to practice. So one of the things is to model that. So make sure that you're having regular feedback conversations with them, and also to model what a feedback conversation can be. So prompts, so giving people prompts for their one-on-ones. So if you've established and you expect that they're having regular one-on-one conversations, you can also start sharing suggestions of the types of questions that they can be asking and reviewing kind of the feedback they got with them. But it's like any habit, it takes practice and time to build. But if you reduce the friction, so anybody a fan of Atomic Habits, take any of the practices from there. If you reduce the friction and you make it really easy for them to try it out, you show them how it benefits them, and you kind of close the loop. With enough practice, you'll get there. But you have to expect it, and you have to make it easy to do, and you have to support it. You can't just say do it. You have to show them how. A lot of people have never been taught how to give feedback. It's amazing to me. Like, people can go, can't remember what the stat is, but it's something like most people don't get any management training until 10 years into their management career, which is insane. So don't assume that people know how to do it or that it's easy, because even having practiced it for 15 years, it's still hard. So, model it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. And I see one here that I think all 3 of you will have really good insights to. So I think that'll be a beautiful one to end off on. So this one, it's from Anonymous. I am currently serving as interim manager and love a lot about it, but I'm still learning. I'm curious what you'd recommend for learning and developing as a new manager. And I think any tips or things you've heard or done would kind of fit into this as well.
Probably the most recommended book, if you want to read, there's 1,000 books out there, but High Output Management is sort of kind of a classic, especially if you're in a tech company. It's a little tech specific, so if you're not in tech, but even so, I actually think it really more just shifts your mindset into what is your job as a manager. You have to start realizing that your job is actually to get a whole bunch of other people to produce something great, and you are no longer the person getting the thing done. You're all there to support making sure it does get done. So it's a mind shift change. High output management is a good starting primer.
One thing I could also share to that question is be curious. As an employee, you normally do your task and that's it, right? But you never ask why you're doing it. How could it be improved? So when you get to a manager level, being curious, I think it's a key part of it, because you start to question things that could actually improve processes, that could improve relationships, and also be nosy. Like poke around the organization, understand how everything works, become a product expert. So I would definitely say that would help a lot in that transition from employee to manager, for sure.
Yeah, you two kind of stole my thunder on that idea, but I think it really is, manager position can be very lonely, especially if you're interim manager or just starting out. I think if there's a strong kind of feedback loop or ways for managers to really kind of interact with each other and kind of talk about best practices or what's working well with their team, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but also listening from your team as well. If you start to listen to what your team is saying or thinking and helping support them in that way, you start to kind of better understand how you can kind of help leverage your power that you just gained to help kind of boost their voice and become their champions as well. Man, there's so many good questions.
Oh, awesome. Well, we're right at the hour, of a minute over time. I apologize to everyone who is still hanging on this call with us. I just wanted to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. I know the four of us have had a wonderful session with all of you. We appreciate all the comments coming in, all the answers you gave us, all the questions.